Alright guys, so I showed you in the last video how we diagnosed the issue on this. And in case you missed the diagnostics on this one, I'm going to post a link in the description below, so go check out the other video so that you guys can see how we diagnosed this. And so now here we're going to show you the complete disassembly and reassembly of the camshaft and lifters on this vehicle. So let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see right over here, I've already got the valve cover off, and to do that I had to take the alternator loose. So we're gonna kind of start from, the only thing we've taken off is the 4 coils and the valve cover over here, and then the belt, we took the belt off already, and the alternator is loose, but that's it so far. And then of course the intake boot. So we're gonna kind of start from here. And so the first thing that I'm gonna do is, let me go ahead and disconnect that battery. Okay, the battery's completely disconnected here. So let's get the vehicle up in the air and go ahead and drain the oil and coolant. All right, so truck's up in the air. I got the oil draining, and now on to the coolant. Next, I'm gonna remove this piece. Next, I'm gonna remove this upper hose and the fan shroud. On the bottom of the fan shroud, right here, is this piece. So you're gonna wanna take that piece off, and then when you begin lifting this up, there's an electric fan underneath it. The electric fan got a tab on top and then a clip on the bottom. So you're gonna wanna pop those clips out and then disconnect the connector and then remove it all together at the same time. Well, it looks like we almost have room to start working on this. So next I'm gonna get this fan off. Okay, so we got the fan off, and I'm gonna go ahead and finish taking this out of the way because it's bothering me just sitting there like that. All right, next I'm gonna get all these heater hoses taken off of here. All right, now let's get this throttle body bracket off. Let's go ahead and get the water pump off. Now what I want to do is I gotta get this whole timing cover deal off. So I'm gonna unbolt the compressor first of all. So here's a bottom view of the compressor. There's just 3 nuts, one there that I already took off, and then this bolt here. The compressor is loose, but I'm gonna take these studs out with a 5.5mm socket, just so that the compressor can hang here and I don't have to evacuate the Freon. And now I can just hang here. Let's get this crank pulley off next. From here, I'm just gonna take off the rest of the bolts for the timing cover. A few of these from the oil pan in the front have to come off, and then we can get this cover pulled off. Connector here. This one here. Yeah. Well, I know I'm gonna have to take off the oil pan and stuff, but I think next I'm gonna work on the top a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that air box off. Much more room now to work on it. So let me get this intake off. It's just bothering me. So there's not much to it, just some bolts on either side, vacuum lines and things on the back. I'm gonna have to take off that fuel line back there, but it's no big deal. All right, I got the intake off here. All it is 5 bolts down each side. And then there's a connector back here. And then there's one that plugs in all the way back here. And it corresponds to those plugs back there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get this valve cover off. I'm just gonna take off these 4 coils and then the bolts for the valve cover. It should come off pretty easy. But I must say, I hate these stupid red clips that Chrysler puts on all their vehicles. They're so annoying. You just never know if they're gonna come out easy. Oh look, that one was easy. That one was easy. That one was easy. My thumbs feel like they're breaking from taking all these off. But anyway, let's move on. Valve cover is off and we're almost to the fun part. The only thing left to do now is take off these rocker arms. There's one for the exhaust side and one for the intake side. 5 bolts on each side and these will come out. Once the bolts are loose, this whole assembly just comes right out. Just like that. Easy. And in case you're wondering, you can't switch these because the intake side is labeled with an I. These push rods, however, they are different. So you can see the one on top is going to push on the intake valve, the one on the bottom on the exhaust. If we pull them out, you'll notice the exhaust side is longer. 4 intake push rods and 4 exhaust push rods. So this is what it looks like so far. I'm gonna go ahead and do the other side off camera just to save time. And then before we start taking out these bolts to get the cylinder heads off, let's go ahead and unbolt the exhaust underneath. Otherwise we won't be getting those heads out. Spray a little deep creep. Sometimes the nuts on the back side of the bolt, they spin when you try to take the bolt out, and you may find it necessary to grab onto the back side with a pair of pliers so that you can zip out the bolt. Prime example here. Exhaust is loose on both sides, so we're good there. Next, I'm going to work on getting this oil pan off. So I'll start by taking off this bracket, probably take off this crossbar, and then the pan. Oil pan is off at this point, so we need to get the oil pump off next. And in order to get the oil pump off, we got to get this strainer and this pickup tube off. So we just got a nut here, and then we got a bolt up here. Got the nuts and bolts off now. Oops. So with that pickup tube removed now, the oil pump can come off. But before we take off the oil pump, let's go ahead and get these cylinder heads off. So on each side of the cylinder head, there's 10 of these 15mm bolts, plus 5 10mm bolts here on the top. So I'm gonna get those off. Let's go to work. Oh, Renee!
That bitch won't go, man.
How are we gonna get it back on?
Let's get it back on.
All right, cylinder head is off. I gotta get the coolant out of those cylinders, but this is what it looks like here. And we can see our lifters right in there. So I'm gonna get the other side off, and then we'll get the lifters off. Here's the cylinder head here in all her glory. I forgot to show on the back of the cylinder head, there's this ground wire here. On this one that I'm taking off on the driver's side, there's one too. right back there. A 13 millimeter nut, or bolt rather. All right, both cylinder heads are off. I'm gonna go ahead and get these lifters out and we can take a look at them. I especially want to see the one on number 5, see what's going on there. Here's one. Oh yeah. Yeah, this thing's trashed. All right, let's lay these out and get a closer look. No good, guys, no good. Look at this lifter. It won't even move. It's totally locked up. I'll show you a good one for comparison. See, this one's good. Look at the difference. Let's get this oil pump off now. So the number 1 piston right here is at top dead center, and that mark right there is facing up. So we know that we are in the right timing position. So now I'm gonna retract this tensioner, slide it back, stick a pen through it to keep it loose, and then I can break this bolt loose and slide the gears and the chain and everything off together. Alright guys, here's the whole camshaft. This is the front of it. Check it out. Look at this lobe. Oh man. It's messed up. And then we come further down over here. We got this one. I'd say that's pretty bad. So here's the new camshaft here. So I'm gonna get this thrown in there. If you're having trouble getting the new camshaft in, this last little bit, it can be kind of tricky. All you gotta do, take the gear, line it up with the pin, and once it's on there, then you can wiggle this back and forth and slide it in the rest of the way. Just kind of go back and forth slightly and put a little pressure, and it'll go in the rest of the way. All right, the plate is back on. Those 4 bolts are torqued to 9 foot-pounds. So let's get the gears on. So this is how it goes back in on the cam gear. There's 2 marks on the timing chain that go on either side of that notch right there. And then on the sprocket here, there's a single mark on this chain link that corresponds with a dot. See right there, the dot on this sprocket. So you see that mark on that chain goes with the dot on the sprocket. This bolt gets torqued to 72 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to get the oil pump on, and the 4 oil pump bolts get torqued to 21 foot-pounds. Before I reinstall the heads, I've gotten them cleaned up. And I'm going to check them to make sure that they're perfectly straight. If not, they're going to have to go to the machine shop. At this point, I just have to clean up the surface on the cylinder block on each side. So I've gotten this one over here pretty much cleaned up, ready for the head gasket. And then the one over here, I haven't even done any at all. I still need to clean up this side. So when you buy the lifters from the dealer, they come pre-oiled and everything. They come like this. And they say on here, see, this one says MDS front, and then like this one says MDS rear. The MDS, of course, is the multiple displacement system for the cylinder kill. So when you're on the highway, it cuts off 4 of the cylinders and basically turns it into a 4-cylinder to save gas. So the lifters with the holes in them are the ones for the MDS. So they're labeled front and rear, so you just got to put them in that order. So cylinder 1 and 7 on the driver's side get the MDS lifters, and then on the passenger side it's the 2 in the middle, 4 and 6. Those get the MDS lifters. So when you put them in, just pay attention to that. But like I said, they're labeled front and rear. So if the front of the engine's over here where my foot is, then if you're on the driver's side, then you have front and rear. Then cylinder 1 has the MDS lifters and cylinder 7 has the MDS lifters. And if you go to put this on the passenger side, then the front and rear basically would be reversed. So then the front of the engine's over here, and so then you have cylinder 4 and 6 that have the MDS lifters. See, and now this is the rear, this is the front. So this is the rear, and we're on the driver's side, so they just slide in like this. Hard to do it with one hand, but you get the idea. Tighten the bolt and repeat the process. These lifter holder bolts, they get torqued to 9 foot-pounds. Make sure too that you guys blow out all these holes where the cylinder head bolts go through. Blow them all out with compressed air, because when you take off the cylinder head, they tend to get coolant inside of them. So you're gonna wanna blow those out so you don't have any issues going back together. Here's the new head gasket. Here's the old one that I tore to pieces. So the right and left, they're labeled with an L. And then on the right side is labeled with an R. So the left side is always the driver's side, and the right side is always the passenger. So get these put on now. The head gaskets are on, so it's time to put the heads on now. Hey, this is what I call getting into your work. So I'm gonna get the head bolts in now and torque them down, and from here it's pretty much straightforward. Pause to read the torque specs and torque sequence. So on the last step, you're supposed to rotate the bolts 90 degrees. What I do to get these as close to 90 degrees as possible is on the top of the bolt, I take a mark with a paint pen and I mark one edge of the bolt. That way I'll rotate at 90 degrees and get the part with the paint to line up over here 90 degrees. That way I know how far the bolt has moved. It makes it a little bit easier than trying to guess where you're at with it. The heads are torqued down, so now we're gonna get the push rods in. Push rods are in. Remember, the ones on the bottom for the exhaust are the longer ones. Make sure, guys, when you put them in, that you kind of make sure that it gets in all the way. For example, when you put the push rods in for the first time after replacing the lifters, you'll hear a kind of a click once it seats into place. I'll show you. So you hear that? So I'm just gonna make sure that the push rods are properly seated in the rocker arms. And then once I make sure they're all properly seated, I'm gonna torque these 5 bolts to 16 foot-pounds, going from the inside out. Time to put the valve covers on. Valve covers are back on. The ground wires behind the head are tight. The nut for the dipstick bracket is on. The coils are on now. So I'm gonna fix some of this wiring before we move on to the intake. All right, the wiring's looking a lot better now. Got everything connected up. So I'll work on the timing cover next. New timing cover gasket and new crank seal. Timing cover is loosely installed. Next, the water pump. Got a new water pump gasket installed. All these bolts get torqued to 21 foot-pounds. Now I'm gonna get the intake back on. New intake gaskets, of course, including those funny shaped ones here and here. So we're back underneath the truck, and I'm gonna get the oil pan on and the pickup tube and all the other stuff down here. So this is what the oil pan gasket looks like. Kind of funky. So the corners are gonna need silicone in all four corners. But yeah, I'm gonna get that together, get this surface cleaned off, get the pickup tube on, oil pan, gasket. Since I have a little more room with the oil pan off, I went ahead and put the compressor on. And now I got the pickup tube on and the bolt and nut torqued to 21 foot-pounds. All right, I got the bottom of the oil pan cleaned out. There's a bunch of metal shavings in there, so I got all that cleaned out and I'm ready to get this pan on. Yeah, I had to take the pickup tube back off because I forgot you got to put the oil pan gasket on first and then the pickup tube. The pan is back on, this bracket's on. New oil filter. All of this is attached out where it's supposed to be. All the wires reattached. The crossbar is on. And now I'm gonna go ahead and bolt the exhaust back up on both sides. I went ahead and I'll show you guys. I went ahead and got new nuts because I didn't want to try to fight the old ones. They're about 10 bucks a piece. From the dealer, of course. Get that back on there. Exhaust is on both sides here. Time to put on the crank pulley. Next, I'm gonna put on the tensioner, the belt, the bracket for the throttle body, and the alternator. So we got that done. AC line's in place. I ran this one vacuum line. There's another one that goes here, but I ran all that. Alternator's hooked up. I have a few wiring things over here. I gotta get this coolant temperature sensor plugged in. Gotta get these heater hoses and all that connected. This wiring, all this wiring here, I gotta get plugged in. It goes to the, some of it to the throttle body right here and the coolant temp sensor. So let me get that done. And then behind the thermostat, there's the cam sensor. Heater hose is connected. The wiring for the cam sensor, the coolant temperature, and the throttle body, all that's in place. Next thing would be to put the fan on. Now onto the fan shroud and connecting the cooling fan. Fan shroud is on. I'm gonna get the radiator hoses on now and then raise it up and get that last little, this last little piece of the fan on there. Now I'm gonna get the airbox installed. Airbox on, and this hose going here. And there's one here. I better remember which one goes here. Oh yes, it's the one that I tucked behind here. There. There. There we go. Don't want to forget the oil. That would be bad. Alright, the intake boot's on. The battery's connected. All the vacuum lines and everything are connected. I got oil in it. I got coolant in it. The only thing I want to do before I start it is right here on the thermostat housing. I don't know if you can see it. Right here. This little bolt right here, this is the bleeder screw. You got to use a quarter inch hex socket to take it off. Just take it out for a second until all the air comes out and you start getting coolant running out, and then put it back in. So that's what I'm going to do real quick before I start it up. All right guys, I'm just going to hold the gas pedal down and crank it over for about 10 or 15 seconds. That keeps the engine from starting. That way I could just get some oil circulating through the engine before I crank it up. So let me do that real quick. Battery's kind of weak, but let's crank it up and see how she does. The truck's been running for about 10 minutes now. Sounds really good. Sounds really good, so we're just gonna test drive it and probably keep it for another day or two. Just put some miles on it, test drive it, make sure everything's good, and then we'll give it back to them.